Paul's first letter to the Corinthians, chapter 8. Now, concerning things sacrificed to idols, we know that we all have knowledge. Knowledge puffs up, but love builds up. But if anyone thinks that he knows anything, he doesn't yet know as he ought to know. But anyone who loves God is known by him. Therefore, concerning the eating of things sacrificed to idols, we know that no idol is anything in the world, and that there is no other God but one. For though there are things that are called gods, whether in the heavens or on earth, as there are many gods and many lords, yet to us there is one God, the Father, of whom are all things, and we for him, and one Lord, Jesus Christ, through whom are all things, and we live through him. However, that knowledge isn't in all men, but some, with consciousness of an idol until now, eat as of a thing sacrificed to an idol, and their conscience, being weak, is defiled. But food will not commend us to God. For neither, if we don't eat, are we the worse, nor, if we eat, are we the better. But be careful that by no means does this liberty of yours become a stumbling block to the weak. For if a man sees you, who have knowledge, sitting in an idol's temple, won't his conscience, if he is weak, be emboldened to eat things sacrificed to idols? And through your knowledge, he who is weak perishes, the brother for whose sake Christ died. Thus, sinning against the brothers, and wounding their conscience when it is weak, you sin against Christ. Therefore, if food causes my brother to stumble, I will eat no meat forevermore, that I don't cause my brother to stumble. Have you ever been completely right about something? Technically, factually right, but still managed to hurt someone else with it? That's exactly the situation Paul is trying to untangle in 1 Corinthians 8. And I think it might be one of the most practical chapters in the whole New Testament for how to treat each other, day to day. So let's set the scene. The Corinthians had written Paul a letter with a bunch of follow-up questions, and this one was about food, specifically meat that had been offered to idols. Now here's why this is such a big deal. In Corinth, idol worship wasn't some separate religious activity you could opt out of. It had been woven into everything. Business meetings, weddings, funerals, parties, birthdays. A huge number of normal social events in Greek and Roman life happened inside idol temples. And the meat from those sacrifices didn't just disappear after the ceremony. It was sold in the regular public market, no label attached, no disclaimer. So picture being a brand new Christian in that world. You've just turned away from the gods you used to worship, and now you can't even go to your cousin's wedding, you can't go to a business dinner, you can't even buy meat at the market without wondering, did this come from some idol sacrifice? For a lot of the Corinthian Christians, Paul's earlier teaching on this must have felt less like a rule and more kind of like social exile. So naturally some of them pushed back. Paul, we know the idols aren't real gods. There's only one true God. So what does it matter if we eat the meat? And here's the interesting catch. Paul doesn't tell them they're wrong. He agrees with their theology completely. The idols are nothing. Food is just food. On the facts, they've got it totally right. But then Paul says something simple and disruptive. He says being right isn't the question. He writes, knowledge puffs up, but love builds up. That word puffs up in the original Greek is the same word you use for inflating a balloon. Knowledge, used without love, doesn't make you bigger, it makes you hollow. It just fills you with air. Love does the opposite, it builds. Like laying brick after brick, one inflates, the other constructs something that lasts. Pretend you're a doctor, and you know, correctly and factually, that some certain food won't actually hurt a patient medically. But that patient has a deep, genuine fear of it. Could be for any reason, past trauma, just a bad experience when they were 6. But what we do know is that food sends them into a full-blown panic. Now would you, as a good doctor, just say, well, I'm right, so eat it? Probably not. A good doctor knows that being correct and being caring aren't always the same move. Sometimes love means setting your righteousness aside for somebody else's sake. And that's Paul's point. He's not saying knowledge is bad. He's saying knowledge without love is unfinished and could even be dangerous. So then Paul names the real issue at hand. Not everyone in the Corinthian church had the same convictions. Some of them had come out of deep, sincere idol worship. For them, that meat wasn't neutral. It still felt spiritually loaded. Their conscience, Paul says, was weak, meaning it was sincere, but not yet fully informed. And here's the part that should stop us in our tracks. Paul says if someone violates their own conscience, even a mistaken one, that's still sin for them. Now this tracks closely with what the Catechism teaches about conscience even today. Deep within his conscience, man discovers a law which he has not laid upon himself, but which he must obey. His conscience is man's most secret core and his sanctuary. There he is alone with God, whose voice echoes in his depths. And further, a human being must always obey the certain judgment of his conscience. If he were deliberately to act against it, he would condemn himself. In other words, conscience isn't just a minor detail. It's hallowed ground. Even when it's mistaken, you don't bulldoze through someone else's conscience just because you happen to be standing with more accurate information. Then Paul goes on to raise the stakes even higher. He says, imagine a strong Christian, someone who knows the idol is nothing, eating the meat openly, maybe even right there in that temple. Now, a weaker believer sees this and thinks, well, if they're doing it, maybe it's fine, and follows along, even though their own conscience is screaming no. That weaker believer has just been pulled into violating their own conscience. And who caused it? Who was the one technically right? Paul's verdict is startling. When you sin against them in this way and wound their weak conscience, you sin against Christ. Read that again. Not you sin against your brother, though that's true too. You sin against Christ himself. Why? Because that brother is someone Christ died for. To casually wreck their conscience for the sake of proving a point, or just exercising a freedom you're entitled to, is to treat cheaply what cost Jesus everything. And then Paul goes on to do something pretty in line with his character if you've been paying attention. He doesn't just lecture the Corinthians, he tells them what he is personally willing to do about it. Therefore, if food makes my brother stumble, I will never eat meat, lest I make my brother stumble. Notice what he's giving up. Not a sin, not something forbidden. A perfectly good, healthy, permissible thing. Meat, laid down entirely, indefinitely, for the sake of someone else's conscience. That's not Paul being legalistic. It's Paul modeling exactly what he just taught them. Love that builds instead of knowledge that puffs up. We can kind of think of it like a parent who's having a birthday party for their child, who's not allergic to peanuts, but stops bringing anything with peanuts in it at all. Not because they have to, but because they know there's a child at the party who has a peanut allergy. Nobody's wrong about peanuts being generally safe, but that's not the point. The point is that love notices the person standing next to you, and it adjusts. And here's the heart of this chapter. It's entirely possible to be doctrinally correct, but still fail to love well. Paul never asks the strong Corinthians to pretend idols are real, or to abandon the truth. He asks them to hold their truth with humility, to let love, not just correctness, decide how they use their freedoms. So before you go, here's a question for us. Is there something that I'm fully free and correct and right to do, but that I've never stopped to ask whether it actually is building someone up or just proving that I know better? Take that to prayer and let love, not just knowledge, lead the way.